So I'd like to welcome everybody to this Lunch and Learn opportunity hosted by Crossroads of Caring. My name is Mary Ann Brody, and I'm the Executive Director here at Crossroads of Caring. And today I am very happy to welcome Tim Gaura, who is a staff chaplain at Arnot Ogden Medical Center in Elmira, New York. And he's going to talk to us today about supporting staff wherever you may be. So Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us
Thanks,
started.
Marianne. Um, Let me just see if I can. Yay! So, it was already in the slide deck. I'm going to ask for those present, share your name, share where the context for which you work, and what was your favorite childhood toy or activity. A very broad category. So for me, Tim, he, him pronouns, work at Arnett Medical Center, and my favorite childhood toy was playing with cats because I would see the grown-ups wrap my siblings and nieces and nephews in blankets and swaddle them. So I thought I could do that with cats, and the cats didn't like it for some reason. But infinite hours of play and running around, and still to this day, I like you know, playing with, cats or petting them or things like that. So we'll just go around as you're able, your name, your context for your work, and your favorite childhood toy or activity.
I'm going to jump in since I already introduced myself. My favorite activity, I'm here in Rochester, New York, but my favorite activity when I was younger was climbing trees. I loved climbing up and being up above the world and having the wonderful privilege of looking out at a larger area than I could see from the ground. And how about I invite Lisa? I'll invite Lisa.
Sure. I'm Lisa Alger. I'm a CPE intern with Arnot Health System. And I would say that the thing that leaps to my mind for favorite childhood toy or activity was chasing my brothers while in the crazy wheel, if anyone remembers what the crazy wheel was.
I'll jump in. I'm Greg Kramer. I'm rector at Church of the Epiphany in Gates, just outside of Rochester. Um, Similar, Marianne, to you as well. I love climbing trees, but the first thing that popped into my head, and mostly outdoor activities, but I grew up in California and we had huge rosemary hedge, and it was always full of very almost sticky flowers, and it was covered in bees, honeybees. And I used to love to just get really close and watch the bees. And I even got up to where I could actually pet the back of a bee with my finger without getting stung. So I used to love to do that.
I'll jump in. Sorry, I don't have my video going right now. I'll have it on in a little bit. I stay at home with my two toddler boys, um, so I'll have it on in a bit. But my name's Sierra, she, her pronouns. I am a CPE intern and also the music chaplain for Upstate University Hospital in Syracuse, New York. And my favorite childhood activity, I sense an outdoor theme going on, and I'm going to jump in that boat and say that I loved the outdoors. Some of my fondest childhood memories were hiking, the short little mountains in the Adirondacks. So like Bald Mountain, Rocky Mountain, and the Old Forge Inlet area. I loved hiking and running down hills. Like it's just the coolest feeling. Love doing it. So good to meet everybody.
Hi, my name's Larry Jennings. If I'm not answering, my internet keeps cutting out. So I keep losing what's going on. I shut my video off, hoping that helps some. I'm the director of spiritual services at Guthrie Robert Packer Hospital. And I guess probably my favorite childhood activity. I grew up on a farm, and I used to love to play hide and seek in the cornfields when they were high. And we'd spend hours in the cornfield playing hide and seek and running from each other. But that's been a few years ago.
Yeah.
I'll go. My name is Todd Ames. I'm also a CPE intern at UHS in the Binghamton area and currently at Wilson Memorial Hospital. My favorite childhood activity was riding my bike all over the place. It started with my big wheel, which I think is related. Is the crazy wheel, Lisa, the thing that spun in a circle and you use your hands? Is that a crazy wheel?
The crazy wheel, Todd, was you had two wheels and you had handles on each wheel, and you could take your
Right. You could.
wherever.
You're right. It was like the amped up version of the big wheel, which is where my like of bicycles started. But then I went to the banana seat with a cool pattern on up to a mountain bike. Finally, so I still like to bike. So it wasn't gone.
For those who are just coming in, we're sharing our name, our context of work, and what was our favorite childhood toy or activity, if anyone else would like to share. Okay, so I am noticing the smiles on people's faces, the nods, the laughter, seeing joy and happiness. These are themes that we're going to come up. The other thing that I'm noticing as well is how many of the things that we've mentioned is unstructured play, right? Unsupervised, unstructured play. And that'll be a part of this as well, for foreshadowing. My aim is to talk for about 30 minutes or so, and then to have time for questions here at the end. So if you have questions, please jot them down or share them in the chat, and we'll get to those there at the end. In the theme of serious silliness, this is about a 1-minute clip, and unfortunately, there is an ad because of how it is.
With Thrivent, your money can be a force for good for the people, families, and communities you're most thankful for. Thrivent, where money means more.
I'm not hearing the videos sound too well.
Did you remember to optimize for sound?
Let me.
When you share on the far right,
All right.
you click share, and then on the far right, it's optimized for sound and video clip. There are two things, usually little
Yep.
boxes you can check.
All right, let's.
You may have to stop sharing and start sharing again.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I just clicked that. Let's see. I can stop share and reshare.
and then you have to check the boxes now.
Optimize, yep.
Yep.
And okay. Let's try.
There you go.
You can hear the sound okay? Oops. So I have lost the seeing you guys. But is everyone hearing me okay?
We were seeing a double screen for a minute. Now we just see you.
Okay. Great. So, apologies about the technical difficulties there. So my model of chaplaincy is to be fully human with you, invite you to be fully human with me. Not all chaplains are Christian, but I follow the stereotype. So therefore, I believe sometimes we catch a glimpse of the divine when we are fully human together. And that fully human together is a key part of how I got into this work, doing staff support and bringing silliness into the workplace. So the basic agenda, we're going to talk about the need of staff support, sort of some numbers that are alarming, the financial costs, why it matters. We'll talk about a little bit about burnout, the power of play, and then talk about one of the ways that I use play in my work with staff support, dad jokes and random questions as interventions. And then we'll go into some stories and questions and case studies and things. So healthcare specifically is a really difficult environment to work. Here are some numbers and some statistics that are quite alarming. And one of the dynamics is that healthcare settings specifically are noted as one of the most dangerous places to work, actually. It is a high pressure environment with incredible challenges that are only being more manifest given the political situation of the last couple of years, or the last year, I should say. Some of the financial costs, there's a study by corporate America in terms of dollars put into spiritual care and the return on investment being 6 to 8 fold for every dollar spent in spiritual care. And this is in a healthcare setting. These are some of the statistics that are important to understand as it relates to our Press-Gini scores directly influence our reimbursement rates. So when patients, families, and staff are less satisfied with their experience, that has a financial cost. Quite often we think about our most hospital systems, Arnot as well, has a patient-first model principle. And as I talk with nursing students who shadow us, I like to think about it to shift the perspective almost as an inverted pyramid, that when we can't pour from an empty cup. So when we as staff are stressed and unsupported, we're not supporting families. And when we are not supporting families, a lot of times they struggle to support patients. Whereas, if we support staff and they can support families and families can support patients and we're supporting patients, we are doing it in a more holistic and whole person way. So this is out of the American Hospital Association. Meaning and purpose at work are valuable, but employee retention also requires trust, support, belonging, recognition, and adequate resources. To build inclusive culture where all team members feel valued, connected, and included, organizations must address both the systematic and social aspects of well-being. So how do we do that? And my proposal for this entire workshop is that inviting play and supporting staff in the use of play helps to address that systemic and social aspects of well-being. Burnout is something that has gotten a lot of attention, as well as moral injury and secondary or vicarious trauma. This is something in which many of us have heard. These are some physical, emotional, and behavioral signs of burnout. And one of the things that I would highlight is that there is increasing information about the stress affecting us physically, affecting our productivity, and affecting our ability to connect with others, to feel joy, to be able to be adaptable and flexible, and these signs of burnout are almost exact mirrors of the benefits of play. So this is a really wonderful study last year, 2024, The Power of Play, Losing and Finding Ourselves. And these are some of the things that they present as the benefits of entering into a state or place of play. Interestingly, the neurobiology of this, when we play, we have endorphins that actually help us feel more calm and directly combat some of the biological stressors and triggers of stress. And as you see the sort of before and after, the signs of burnout and play, that almost one-to-one relationship. When I am discussing with someone and I will, ask, do you have time for a random question, or are you up for a joke today? I'm listening for their response. And if I notice a change in what is their normal, right? If they're normally like, yes, all the time, yeah, 100%, and they shift towards, I don't have time for that right now. Generally within 6 to 8 weeks, even as a chaplain, just moving through the hospital space, I will start to see visible signs of burnout manifest in their interactions with me, interactions with other staff, interactions with patients and with families. So I've found that it is a helpful assessment, if you will, for what's going on underneath the surface, especially when there's a change. So to address with a couple of guidelines for random questions, examples, some of the ones that I found really, really helpful, like, what is your favorite side on the Thanksgiving table? We all think that everyone's Thanksgiving table looks exactly like ours, where in fact, oftentimes there are regional or family historical differences that are actually really, really great to share and to then start storying. What was your favorite concert and who did you go with? Some of these also are referred to as magical questions. Is another way of looking at the random questions that is in literature. What's the best season of the year and why? And also just looking at things a little bit with a different perspective. What's your favorite color of pie? Not your favorite flavor, but what your favorite color is. And it's returning to an earlier way of being in the world where colors are more important than flavors. And it changes our relationship to the question and causes us to think a little bit more, to get out of an autopilot. How are you doing? I'm fine. Where those answers just come right off the tip of our tongues. So this is the reason why my recommendation, if you're using random questions, is to use questions that are unfamiliar, that they don't have a stock response ready to just, I don't know if you're actually asking me a question or if you're just saying, how are you? Or if you're just saying hello. Something that's low stakes, questions that are not necessarily going to be triggering or traumatizing as much as possible, and ones that can be quick, that can be response in 30 seconds to 2 minutes, but also that open into storying, into sharing a story, like for instance the concert and who did you go with. This is part of the power that this has is because it shifts our perspective and how we are in that space in that moment. So in the work, this is how I actually started at Arnot, was with random questions. And a couple of responses to this from a social worker. Tim, when he first started asking silly questions, I didn't understand it. Now I get it, and I really appreciate and look forward to it. And this was a social worker in labor and delivery. A clinical assistant in the emergency department setting, now a nursing student, shared this. So I asked your color of the pie question at my girlfriend's family Thanksgiving, and they really loved it. They asked where I got it from, and I talked about you and what you do at the hospital. I've been wanting to tell you. Thank you so much. He said that they talked for almost 2 hours about the question and just the difference of thinking about pies as colors, not necessarily as flavors, and experiencing joy and connection in that question, in that process. I've shifted towards moving towards dad jokes a little bit more recently. And a couple of guidelines for this: you've got to be a little bit more careful to be professionally appropriate. You never know who's listening in or who's coming up behind you. So you want to make sure that anything that you say is held to the highest standards. Also, a lot of jokes require cultural understanding or specific information that may not be widely accessible. So using things as much as possible for the widest audience that you can say to a 4-year-old or an 80-year-old and it be applicable. Again, the quickness is helpful as an individual, you're with an individual on the elevator, right? That like 30-second elevator pitch, something that someone can respond to, can have a laugh, and can then say, I'm going to share that with someone else. And not necessary, but helpful is seasonal. Whether we just had Thanksgiving, we just had Halloween, we're coming up on Thanksgiving, we're coming up into Christmas. So a couple of examples here, and the way in which I sometimes actually hear my own joke echo back to me, because the jokes will utilize the same rumor or gossip networks, but now to a positive effect. And I will sometimes hear the joke come back to me, and I always love when that happens. Couple of responses to dad jokes specifically. Thanks, I really needed that. Sometimes as well, the individual staff will come back and will actually engage in a conversation back and forth. So hey Tim, I've got a dad joke for you, right? And there will be almost this rapport building, trust building as we're playing together. And this was just this week when a supervisor guessed the correct answer of a dad joke. That was the highlight of my week, for real, not even lying, and talking about just how stressful the week was, and needing feeling like he got a win, and needing a laugh, and just really feeling some of the weight lifted from him. So this starts coming into the staff support side of it, and really tapping into your CPE training and the spiritual care training. The follow-up question is, especially when you hear someone say, "I'm so stressed right now, I don't have time for this," or um, they respond, I believe if someone is vulnerable enough to laugh with you, they're usually also vulnerable enough to cry with you, and vice versa. Those emotions are connected in an emotional vulnerability. Here are a couple of responses that I've had to that follow-up question after a random question, after a dad joke, where individuals utilize that connection, right? That sort of a shift of perspective, of shift of space from the play space, right? That they are invited into that being fully human with me, and actually sharing what they are struggling with, what they're challenging with. And the amount of times that I'm communicating, both not just with staff, but also with families and with patients. And we move very quickly from laughing into crying, or crying into laughing. In my previous life, when I was working at the University of Rochester, I was a chaplain on the palliative care floor. And that floor, that was surrounded without a question, had the most amount of laughter of anywhere else in the hospital, including the children's side of Golisano. And when one of my reflections for Lent is that life happens with abundance in the presence of death, and that emotional freedom of laughing and crying being very close together. This follow-up question, play is helpful in and of itself and therapeutic in and of itself, but that follow-up question is where I find a lot of the magic happens. Is that play is the invitation into that being fully human together. Dad jokes or random questions may not be your thing. That's okay. A couple of other ways to bring play into the workspace. We had Rob, our head of our volunteer department. He would come in with silly hats and bells on. Absolutely loved it. It brought people a smile to their face. And silly hats was something that he did. I don't feel necessarily comfortable doing that, but he was able to incorporate it into his role, and was able to support staff in a large way. Also, pet therapy is a way of bringing play into the space as well. Art therapy, music, things like that. At Arnot, we have a yearly gift basket bazaar, and departments put together gift baskets. They donate them to the auxiliary. The auxiliary auctions them off, and that helps support volunteers and other programming at the hospital. We have a non-carving pumpkin contest, and departments decorate pumpkins, and they're displayed in the lobby, and visitors vote on them and then rank them. In previous years, we've done miniature Christmas tree decorating. Each year for Halloween, departments are invited to dress up as to come in costume, as long as it's tasteful and professional. These are ways to engage in play. And some of them are institutional, some of them are more on an individual basis, but I'm inviting you to think creatively and to find where's your strengths to bring play into a space. One acknowledgement to that is that there are many different ways to play, and we have a language. We each have almost like a love language. We have a play language. So this is research coming out of Playficent, which postulates that there are 8 different personalities of play. We have the Joker. This is the class clown. This is the person who's going to be silly for silly sake, is willing to be laughed at if it gets a laugh from someone else. These individuals are the ones who often will wear the silly hats and are absolutely wonderful. The kinesathlete, that's the individuals who play through movement, right? And they can't stop moving, and find joy in movement. The explorer, these are your travelers. These are the individuals who are traveling and or bringing the world in through, like I saw this, I ordered online and wanted everyone to try it. The competitor, these are the ones that do the interdepartmental competitions. Who can raise the most money for charity? Who can collect the most change? Who can, the sort of competition in and of itself is where they find joy and where they find play. The director, organizer, these are your party planners, the ones who find joy in party planning. And I know some of you out there might be saying like, ooh, how is that play? But like being able to bring the connector, being able to bring people together. The collector is the person who is, as a child, they were collecting coins, stamps, cards. They are the ones that are wanting to make sure that they have the yearly calendar or have we do this every year. It's an advent calendar, or it's a fundraiser, and they make sure that it's done because they need to make sure they have one for this year. The artist, creator, these are the ones who are bringing art into the workspace, whether it's pottery or music or painting. Many different forms of art comes into this space. And the storyteller, right? The ones who find joy in talking about the adventure of coming into work and laughing over the things that they saw or their experiences for it. On this, one important note is that play for one person is work for another, right? I love the grocery store. I love exploring and looking at what's available and finding a good deal. And in the grocery store, I am thinking through, all right, what can I make with this? Or what do I need to do to, like, if I like this is something new, let me try this. Or I'm in my best creative space in the grocery store. For other individuals, going to the grocery store is a chore. It's work. It's a drudgery. And we have a person on my team who's that. And so whenever possible, when we're doing event planning, I always volunteer to go to the store because that is play for me, and I can get things and I can organize them and I can host folks. And my colleague is very happy and joyful that I've got it uncovered, I've got it covered, and he doesn't have to, right? And some of this is also perspective taking, right? The child who is splashing in puddles and it's raining and it's fun and oh my gosh, it's giggling, versus the person who's walking to work in the rain and it's drudgery. Some of it is also perspective taking in, can you enter into that space of play and embrace that flexibility and adaptivity, right? I will conclude with this, and this is from the aforementioned Power of Play, and this is available for on PDF online for free. Thus, at play, we locate an often forgotten aspect of ourselves, moving at the borderline of control and impetuosity, discovering our limits and feeling for mental and physical strengths that we never suspected we possess. At play, we revel in our intrinsic capacity for joy. And if you'll remember our slide from burnout, the apathy, inability to feel emotion, inability to feel joy, things that once brought us pleasure no longer do. This is the connection that I've seen here working in a hospital setting of how play is an incredible way to address burnout in providing staff support. Unfortunately, I will acknowledge the direct correlation or causation of burnout and play is not very understood, especially in institutional settings. We do need more research on this. So most of this is anecdotal and lived experience, but this is what I do and what I found effective. With that, I will stop sharing and ask for any questions.
Questions or maybe even comments about what connected with you, what do you wonder about?
Hi, Tim. I have a question for you. Do you feel that um, your silliness goes better with staff you've already built a rapport with, or do you find it just as helpful with staff you don't interact with as much?
Great question. As it relates to silliness in rapport building, both. So there are some individuals who are more able to enter into that state of play. And there are other individuals who do not allow themselves to enter into that state of play. So this is that old CPE adage, read the room, but being able to go to a perfect stranger and ask, can I share with you a dad joke or a turkey joke? Or can I ask you a random question, especially if it's relevant, like the Thanksgiving side question. And the amount of times that the silliness actually is the thing that's building rapport, right? But there are individuals for whom that's not going to be effective. And so being able to, this is not the one tool you should have in your toolkit, but it is a helpful one, and one that, I've generally not experienced individuals being upset when I first approach them, if that's our first encounter with engaging with a dad joke or a silly question. And if they say nope, then I know for future, right? And we can pivot and move on from there. So, a good question.
I like that you ask permission. Like you don't just toss it out there. You say, do you have, like, I can imagine going up to a nurse's station saying, Do you have time for a silly question?
Yeah.
And if they say no, okay.
Yep. And if they say no, is there anything I can do for you right now? Right?
Mhm.
Is there anything you need? And if they say yes, go get your nursing school degree and come back and be at work as a nurse. That would be helpful. Even still, like they're engaging in play. And if they're super frazzled and hassled, being able to read that even before I approach. But if I don't know, now I do, right? It's an assessment tool because of listening to how they respond. Talking about nursing stations as well, there is a dynamic of this which I find fascinating. Sometimes these conversations pull in others, right?
Mm.
Especially like the concert. What was your first concert? Who did you go with? I will admit, I music is one of my blind points. I don't know a lot of bands and artists and those sorts of things. But other individuals around do, and they get pulled in those conversations, and especially in nursing stations, whereas sometimes those conversations that they've been having have been fraught with tension or have been full of demands. Sometimes it allows them to reset. It allows them to interact with one another, um, and they may have had disagreement, and I've seen where they actually have used uh, a invitation into play to help ease some of that toxicity and some of that tension that's in that on that unit or in that space. Any other questions or comments?
Tim, I had a question, and I apologize if this has already been asked, if my internet's been a little spotty here, but you had said that you noticed, like, if you approach somebody and they don't have time or space to engage with you, and that you notice weeks down the line that you're noting signs of burnout. Do you also see the opposite, that as people engage more in the play or in those conversations with you, do you see a growing like capacity or resilience, or just uh, I guess better spirits in getting through their day-to-day work?
So great question. Do I notice the inverse, growing resilience capacity? Yes. And more specifically, I notice a greater propensity towards gratitude, right?
Mm.
Like, yes, I'm really struggling at work or I'm really struggling at home, and I'm grateful for this. That resilience, I think, sometimes emerges both in terms of self-awareness and emotional awareness, emotional articulation, but also leaning into more healthy coping mechanisms, uh, rather than some of the more destructive, leaning into the addiction, leaning into uh, some of the uh, maladaptive coping strategies. And the other thing about that, which is fascinating, is that other people around them know, right? So people who are more apt to enter into a play space, it is really interesting how others around them, um, for instance, when I was saying the random questions, um, I would get certain folks. When I started shifting towards dad jokes, I got a different set of folks. And people would say, "Oh, did you say that to so and so already?" Right? Or they would often, dad jokes seem to be a more easy, a container that's easier to hold. And so the amount of folks who say, I'm going to tell my nephew that, or I'm going to tell my grandkid that, or I told my son that, he loved it. Uh, what's the joke today? I'm going to put it on my phone so I can tell him when I get home, right? And so there is that sort of building capacity of building connection, and maybe that happens without that, but I don't necessarily hear it unless I engage in that play space too, right? So I do acknowledge some potential for confirmation bias on that, but I do see the individuals who are able to go into a play space being more resilient. And the data also research, the Power of Play article builds that out too. So that there is research for that.
As you were talking, Tim, I was thinking that people just seeing you come into the space, their unit or the room or whatever, they're in a way they start to get conditioned to. Like if I saw you at the end of the hallway, I'd start to smile and go, "Ooh, what's he bringing today?" It would, like, just your presence and your willingness to be vulnerable and play with people changes not just you, but maybe something in the dynamic of the unit. And so I guess my question is, does it make them more playful with each other? Like, have you seen that happening without you? Well, you wouldn't be there to see it, but are you hearing about it?
Right. I think there on both sides. So there are individuals, because of some of the stressors of the situation, knowing the audience, knowing that there are some individuals for whom an invitation into a play space is not going to be effective. Those are the ones that I worry about. But those are also the ones that, I make note, okay, this is an individual that I need to interact with in a different way, right? So it can build resiliency within units, and it can also, being aware that some individuals can feel left out of that, and can actually feel more pushed out. But I would argue that when there's toxicity in the culture, when there's individuals who are feeling like there's not a space for them, they don't feel that sense of belonging, play often is going to those spaces that is needed most, right? The individuals who need that intervention get drawn in, and just like you say, they see me, they smile, they ask, what's the question of the day? What's the joke of the day? And so I've now built up a situation where individuals come to me, which is really, really cool. And sometimes an individual who will come to me, there's that aspect of, please hear what I'm not saying, right? So you're asking me, what's the joke of the day? I'll share that with you. How are you doing? I'm really struggling right now. So it's a gentle way of entering into that space of being into that support. And there are other individuals who that's just not how they're going to interact. And they'll actually go the opposite way. One point that's a little outside of staff support, but in terms of serious silliness that I will mention, I love working with children with grief. I really, really do. And when you're working with children or adolescents with grief, a sibling or a loved one is dying or passing away, silliness is often what allows them to, laughing is what allows them to cry, right? just the other day I was coloring with a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we're talking about Disney and Lilo and Stitch and Halloween and such. And it's building that rapport, it's building that connection, it's building that trust. It's building that safety. And I ask, what's your favorite memory of your aunt, right? Who's passing away? And they share, and their family then enters into that play space too. And it is inviting them into grief. And then asking, you can almost see when they've reached sort of the saturation point, and being able to shift from that. They had a thing of donuts. What's your favorite donut? So being able to go up and down, and to be sensitive to that. I can do that as a chaplain in a way that a lot of times their families, the adults in their families can't, because they are weighed down by the grief, and they are sometimes stuck in that emotion. So by supporting the children who have faster cycles of grief, there's times in which I've seen often their families feel supported because I'm able to do something for the children in a way that the family can join but can't necessarily initiate in that space, in a critical situation in the hospital setting.
Tim, I don't know if I think there's a question in this, but I'm actually maybe just reflecting on your sharing of the statistics that we anticipate something like, I think you said 3.2 million workers are projected to be missing by 2026, right? Like, so literally within the next year. And what you're describing is certainly, in my mind and in my experience with other workforces that I've been in, critical to not just building resilience with people individually, but to the sustaining of workforce, right, in their given circumstances. Do you see a role, like, is there any place or where research is actually happening in terms of how chaplaincy contributes to the maintenance of a dwindling and stressed healthcare workforce or workforce in general?
So there are some places that have initiated chaplain roles that are purely staff support, right?
Yeah.
There are some capacities for that in a variety of different settings. As far as the efficacy of that, we have a little bit of a challenge because it's difficult to show empirical evidence of a negative, right? It's hard to say that this nurse stayed in the hospital 6 months longer than they otherwise would have due to the support of chaplains. I can hear that in an individual telling me that, right? Tim, you helped me stay here longer than I otherwise would have. But in terms of, big data, it's really difficult to show or to prove that negative. There are, when you look at sort of the longer institutional histories, specifically in colleges and universities, it's not uncommon for institutions to get rid of their chaplaincy department, because this is a not revenue generating department or field. And then 5 years later, they build it back up because they realize how only in their absence the things that they were getting from that department. So that's one of the things that as a field we can do better on, and there's a need for more research, is how do we show that with data, and also how do we communicate that to administrators in an effective way.
I had a thought I'd share. We might be out of time here, but real quick, I'm in a church or parish setting, not a chaplaincy per se, but people are people, right? Um, and I've noticed people come, especially around death and funerals. People come, they don't want a funeral. They want a celebration of life. And which is great, and it's exactly what a funeral is. But at least in the Episcopal tradition, it is a celebration of life because we believe in resurrection and all that. Um, but I'll basically say, oh, of course, absolutely, and we'll do a celebration of life, and it's the funeral, right? But there's this connection between people's need to celebrate and the joy and the goodness, and it isn't silliness, but sometimes it is. But it inevitably leads to tears. It inevitably leads to catharsis and people's ability to grieve because we need to grieve. But there is, I see, as you're describing, I see that connection between the grief and the loss and the joy. They're like flip sides of the same coin, is kind of the way I describe it. You wouldn't be sad if you didn't love the person, right? So it's kind of both and. And so celebrating life is a great entry into grieving the loss of that life as well. And I just see that as a natural kind of thing. Some families are better with the silliness or the, telling the goofy stories or the stuff that people didn't know or whatever than other families. But I still see the connection there in a big way. So I'm kind of connecting with what you're saying in that way here in parish life. The other question I had for you, and years ago, I remember watching a Robin Williams film called Patch Adams, and it was kind of about this very thing, about bringing silliness into. Now, he was a doctor, he wasn't a chaplain, and there was a lot of institutional pushback because of it. In fact, I think he got fired or something in the process and starts his own hospital. But anyway, I guess I wondered, do you ever find that kind of institutional pushback when it comes to the silliness and the joy in the midst of pain?
Yes. Um, and it is often by the individuals for whom they are struggling with a repeating recorder in their head that play was not okay, right? And that play is somehow opposed to work. With grieving family, I'm going to go back to grieving families. One of the things that I learned from child life specialists up at Strong is that for children, play is their work, right? This is how they develop. This is how they build those social connections. This is how they develop resilience and independence and the ability to adapt and critical think and all those things. So I will sometimes remind parents that if you see your child playing, doesn't mean that they're not grieving. They're going to work, right? And just like we sometimes go to work after a loss, after a grief, because we need that sense of normality, children will sometimes also go into play. And it's serious play, right? They are working through their feelings in play. When an administrator is saying, well, you're on the clock and you need, there's this different understanding. And it's relatively new actually in terms of management styles and things like that. It's not more common. My grandfather, this is work, not play, right? As me and my brother are throwing logs to stack, you can't have fun because this is work. And that was a lesson that he grew up with. So needing to sort of unpack that a bit. Interestingly as well, the CEO, the outgoing CEO of Arnot, I would ask him like, which is better, pancakes or waffles? Or I would share with him dad jokes. Just as I would see him in the hall, we would walk and talk. We did, graduation ceremonies together and things like that. And it allowed for our relationship to be different than any of the other relationships that he had. I'm frontline chaplain, right? he's CEO of the hospital. It doesn't matter to me, right? He's a person, he's staff under a lot of stress too. And when he was leaving, he asked Tim, how are things? Because I know you have a unique perspective, right? So it actually invited feedback, and I actually had critical feedback for him, in part because of the build, like, and Sierra, you were talking about this in terms of do you need to build rapport before silliness, or can silliness build rapport? In this circumstance, silliness is what actually helped build that rapport. Because I wasn't looking at him as a CEO. I was looking at him as a person, and that mission, that sort of model of chaplaincy, being fully human together, is what enabled that connection. And it's the same way for funerals. It's the same way, throughout the lifespan. But no, it's a good question, good conversation, great topics. Thank you so very much for Mary Ann Brody for allowing me to present on this topic. Thank you so very much for participating in the communications. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Tim, we're at our time boundary. Our next Lunch and Learn isn't until January, and we're just putting together the schedule for 2026. If any of you have topics that you would like to hear about, please let me know. You can put it in the chat, or you can email me at mabrody@crossroadsofcaring.org. And our next Lunch and Learn will be the 15th of January. And so hopefully at some point in December, we'll be sending out a flyer with the topic. But thank you very much, Tim. Happy to have you here with us, and thanks for being willing.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank